Hello YouTube! It's time again for another Pool Plans video where I go over what we'll be seeing soon in Opera Omnia and give my thoughts on the characters and content we can expect. That being said, because this is for the global version of the game, it's entirely possible that some of these things may be changed, so please keep that in mind. Keep in mind as well that these are my poll plans, not a signed poll contract that I am strictly adhering to. This is not a should you pull or anything similar to that, because I don't believe that it's the best format for what I'm aiming for. My goal here is to try and help people make more informed decisions for themselves, because I'm a very firm believer in teaching people to fish rather than just giving them a fish. I see some pretty bad takes in the community sometimes, and the reason a lot of people have the opinions that they have is because it's often, well, they heard that X character is bad and falls off quickly, and oh, you have to pull for Y because they're meta, you can't beat content without them, rather than something that has some of their own thoughts and opinions behind it. I do understand that not everyone wants to do a ton of research for fights and future viability of characters, but I am hoping to help people learn good habits when it comes to deciding whether or not to pull that are based more on fact than on hearsay. With that being said, these are my thoughts, and I do want to encourage dialogue within the community, so please leave a comment down below with what you think and what your plans are. As always, a like and a sub are hugely appreciated, as they help spread the content around and are easy, free ways to help support the channel and help it grow. With that, let's get into it. So first up for the month, we've got Vayne, who is the featured character on these raid banners that we have coming up, along with Cloud of Darkness, who is getting her or its Burst Plus, as well as the return of Strago, and Iroha LDs. Vayne, however, gets an LD, a Burst, and a rework, so we're going to start there. To begin with, Vayne's rework has both his Brave and HP Plus attacks hitting harder, and then both his skill 1 and his skill 2 are free. They don't consume a usage when you're using the plus version. So skill 1 now hits harder and has splash damage, where skill 2 gets extra uses and hits harder, and also gains Brave after the first HP attack, because it has 2. As for his LD, it's a single target Brave HP attack done 3 times that does have refund in between the HP hits. It has no action delay, and it does give him 3 stacks of his Conqueror's Power buff, which is his free turn buff. So it will set up all of those free turns after the fact. It also gives him a new buff for 12 turns that gives party attack and Embrave, as well as party HP damage up and Embrave based regen, which also it gives more to Vayne than it does to his party members, which is really nice. The plus version of the LD skill will extend that free turn buff by 2, and it also doesn't add to turn count just like all of his other plus buttons. His burst is an AoE attack that has split damage, and its effect gives the entire party Embrave based regen again, along with increased attack and Brave damage, as well as bigger caps on those Brave damage hits. Additionally, when any party member breaks an enemy, Vayne will jump in and do a follow-up attack that's AoE Brave hits with a single target HP attack that is triggered twice. He'll refund Brave after the HP attacks, so it makes him really safe, and this can trigger during his and other burst phases. The BT Plus, so when you go green, it's going to increase the party attack and Brave damage even further, and it's going to make the follow-up hit harder. As for Cloud of Darkness, they also get a rework here that gives an extra HP dump to skill 1, and the overhead now grants 20% HP damage up, while it's between 1 and 4 stacks, and then a total of 30% when you're at 5. The Burst Plus, gives an extra 3 turns on the effect, which also gives 20% overflow and HP damage up for the party, which means 50% HP damage up for Cloud of Darkness. As for the fight, we're up against the Jack boss this time, the floating flowery things, I forget the name. They continue to have their, take X number of actions or get blown up by the plus version attack, which still cleanses and is a guaranteed hit. The regular version can be dodged though and won't cleanse. The major problems here are twofold. First, and more easily dealt with, the bosses have absurdly high defenses straight out the gate, and then they gain another 300% more throughout the fight. So you're going to want some kind of defense down or defense ignore or something along those lines, because it will otherwise be a struggle. Bravian comps can work as well. The second major problem here is that the bosses have a mechanic similar to Divine Alexander, where if you take 12 actions without giving them a turn, they will cleanse and then warp to take a turn by force. And that turn is going to hurt. Your best bet is going to be to pump the brakes a bit. Since you have to let them get turns, there's not a huge reason to go crazy aggressive. You can certainly make Vayne work here. I mean, people have done clears with him. You just need to adjust the mindset of, haha, Vayne go unga bunga brrr, because it's not going to work. As for the orb, this far in, and just now mentioning it, it is +4 when you break the enemies. So it's not that bad, as long as you're not getting too greedy. I think I'm going to try a team of Exdeath, Porum, and Beatrix. It should be able to set Beatrix up for tons of breaks while neutering their offenses and taking advantage of them needing turns. Beatrix is actually a really good star here because she's got those counters. When the enemy, hits a party member, she'll pop back and she'll break them, because that the follow-up, the counterattack, is defense ignore, which is really nice. You could probably swap Ace with Exdeath in this team too, and take advantage of his defense downs, or run Setzer with whoever. There's lots of possibilities. Just be mindful of that turn warp. As for my thoughts on Vayne and the other characters, his kit definitely requires more thought and deliberation than it used to, thanks to Lufenia Plus mechanics like orbs and HP thresholds, which is a playstyle that honestly I really enjoy. That being said, you can get a lot of mileage out of him as a tempo control character, kind of like using a C65 for a regular character now to try and get a break reset, or running other delay or turn hogging characters. He's got solid synergy with a handful of specific units. Zell comes to mind here, and I like that kind of combo potential. However, he does tend to spam turns, which can be a liability in certain stages, like this one, if you're not playing to the stage's needs. Any fight that is immune to break can also be a Vayne. Any fight that is immune to breaks can also be an issue for Vayne, since his BT follow-up is only going to trigger when one of your party members breaks. And given that he's kind of a BT or bust character, this can really hinder him a lot in fights like that. They don't happen all the time, but they do exist, so it's good to be aware of them. You do also need to build your party around Vayne a little bit, since you both want to encourage that follow-up to proc as often as possible, as well as remain mindful of how quickly he burns through buffs. For example, Beatrix, who is heavily reliant on party buff counts, may not be the best character to pair with someone who burns through her 6-turn buffs in, 2 or 3 of her turns with ease, because she's kind of slow. Ultimately, though, that's just down to basic team building, so, As for Cloud of Darkness, the minor rework does help its damage out a little bit on S1, or skill 1, and it amps up the overall damage with that nice HP damage boost on the overhead stacks. The burst effect granting, party damage up is nice, and it'll make a noticeable difference in the amount of damage that you deal in, burst, phase, or summon. But Cloud of Darkness is a super common friend unit, and as a result, the BT Plus may not be something that you necessarily want to invest in. If you're trying to save your resources, you can take advantage of a green Cloud of Darkness friend for loads of extra damage without having to go all in on the green. And that's kind of what I plan on doing. So thank you, Cloud of Darkness greeners. I salute your sacrifice. My plans, I'm going in gems. I'm willing to pity on this one if need be. I have been a huge fan of Vayne's in this game since he was released, and I am super excited to use him again. I plan to go green and blue for him. As for Cloud of Darkness, I personally am not investing, as I did not pull their BT, and I don't feel like it's worth it to chase the burst on a unit that I wasn't really interested enough in running to pull for the first time around. Okay, next up we've got Cait Sith's Mission Dungeon. Cait Sith also gets a rework and of course an LD. Skill 1 gets a single additional use and hits harder, but still feels awful to press, as it's a split AoE attack that has 1 HP dump. Not great. Skill 2 is now a free instant turn and heals HP as well, which is nice. The LD here, Lucky Girl, will start by battering the party based on Cait's Embrave, right? And the number of buffs that the party has active as well. So it scales. And it ranges from kind of a decent chunk to almost double the battery, meaning that for most parties this is going to be a pretty fat battery, right? It then instant breaks all enemies, assuming that they're not already broken, and then it does 2 HP hits without using up Cait's Brave. It also grants him a new buff that lasts 10 turns, which increases Cait's personal crit damage, as well as granting 100% crit rate for the party. This is great. Additionally, it gives overflow, HP damage up, and a unique battery effect, all of which are based on the number of buffs that the party has. The more you have, the better it does. The battery effect is going to give you a chunk of Brave every time that your character crits an enemy, which Cait gives you 100% crit rate. So if you use a skill that hits 5 times, they're going to gain Brave 5 times. And it's based on the character's max Brave. I think it scales up to, it's like 18% or something like that. It adds up really quickly and is an awesome way to hit bigger numbers on your skills that have lower hit counts. The LD Call also has this battery effect, as well as the extra overflow crit rate for the party. It does not have the HP damage up though, but it is still a really strong call for when you're about to, use your burst phase for someone. And it's the type that you would really want to put on, like a slow character. As for Cait's high armor, it is the encouragement armor. This is great. And it is party HP split. So it's going to increase your HP caps more than your Brave caps. As for the fight, this one is just special. Cait actually can't mitigate the orbital, so this one is kind of notorious for being kind of crappy. It's a fight against the Echo boss, which is the big ghost in the middle that has the 2 adds, and the one in the middle goes, completely not immune to damage, but it's got like 100% evasion, right? It can be kind of annoying since you do have to let them get turns because it is a sap orb. In order to deal damage, I should say, to the boss, the adds have to be gone, which is fine, they don't have a ton of health. But then the boss is just going to try and resummon them. So the path of least resistance here is definitely Agrius, because the boss is not immune to paralysis or Fated Molly, so you can repeatedly just stun it to prevent it from getting the adds back. The orb does fall off at 79%, but comes back at 59% for the rest of the fight. There is a secondary orb condition, which is Break, but it's only +1, and you're really strongly encouraged to let it get turns, but without letting it summon its adds. And if memory serves, and don't quote me on this, I think that it also warps its turns on you. So you definitely want to have someone on deck that can keep it from bringing the adds back. So Agrius, 100%, the MVP here, stuns for days, it's great. Beyond that, you're going to want someone else that can deal with the orb. Any sap is fine. Honestly, you could take Agrius and use one of the the E-spheres on her, like Ferris or whatever, and you're done. And then you're either going to want Brave Gain stonks like Porum, or someone with some kind of defense down or Setzer, because this is another one of those bosses whose defense just skyrockets, shoots through the roof. Tifa is a pretty decent shout here, since she, on her LD and her skill 1, Beat Rush, she has all of those HP dumps with the refund, so that can work as well. Boss doesn't have a ton of HP, so you can definitely burn through it without too much difficulty. It's just kind of annoying. I plan on taking X-Death here, since he naturally fulfills the orbs and can ignore the boss's defense pretty easily. Beyond that, it's going to be Agrius and maybe Y'shtola, since it's pretty easy, especially with Y'shtola, to tick X-Death's burst effect for tons and tons of damage. I am curious to try it and see if his BT effect works for the orb, but it probably doesn't, so we'll see what happens. As for my plans, I am absolutely pulling here. Probably with tickets, though. I like what Kate has to offer, though pressing skill 1, absolutely horrible. It's possibly the worst button in the entire game. At the absolute bare minimum, though, this is an awesome call to use for the kind of Brave Gain stupidity that I like to get up to. Shout out to Alphano here. Go subscribe to him if you haven't already. He is the progenitor of Brave Gain stonks. I've spent some time using the C90 reworked Kate Sith, and I gotta say, having skill 1 do actual damage is really nice. Dice 2. Last for the cycle, we've got Shulk's event, which comes along with Fujin's LD, the second run of it, aka the character that you're really only going to be seeing RVK use. Shout out to RVK. So, Shulk. Shulk is a consecutive turn stealer, kind of similar to Vayne, sort of. So, both of her base skills have regular and plus versions, the latter of which is you get by using the base version of skill 1. So you use skill 1, the regular one, and it turns both of them into the plus, and then when you use one, they turn back. The plus versions both grant an extra HP attack on them, and generally hit harder, but they have the same number of brave hits, which I think they both are 6 hits, I think. So, skill 1 is a personal battery followed by a single target brave HP attack that has Splash. It gives a buff that increases Shulk's attack and max brave, and then gives her access to her brave and HP plus, which you will literally never use. Skill 2 is an AoE brave HP attack that has split damage, and it gives Shulk a brave shield, sort of like 9 or Warrior of Light, that's equal to 100% of the damage that it deals. It only shields her, but it will pretty regularly be very, very beefy, 250k plus. It also gives her an overhead that lasts for 2 turns, which gives HP damage up, prevents her brave from going below 30% of her M brave, and it lets her warp after enemy turns, kind of like Realm or Eldnarsh. Additionally, after Shulk takes a turn, it will remove your action delay and give you a second free turn. But that will only trigger once. So you won't get a second free turn after the first one. You can kind of cheese your way past this using the C65, but you get the idea. You want to maintain uptime on this overhead as much as possible. Speaking of C65, it's a brave HP attack that extends all of her buff durations by 2, which is pretty decent. Her EX is a single target brave HP attack that has refund in between its multiple dumps. I think it's 4? Don't quote me on that. It also extends her buffs by 2 turns and gives her a new buff that grants attack and overflow. So I think she's got 2 personal buffs and then the overhead. Speaking of which, it gives her 4 turns of her overhead buff, which is really nice because normally you would only get 2. The recast is a little slow, but you're going to be spamming skills literally the entire time with her, so it's going to be up pretty frequently either way. She probably has one of those, 4 skill recast kind of deals. Shulk's LD, on the other hand, is actually kind of interesting. You get 3 uses, which sounds super low for a skill spammer with a ton of turns, but its effect is basically a personal reset button. It recovers all of her skill uses outside of her LD and her calls. It battery Shulk, fills her EX gauge, and is an AoE dispel. It also has no action delay or turn count. So this is sort of like King's reload skill, his skill 2, on like ultra steroids. The LD call is notable for being a full heal, self battery, self cleanse, AoE dispel, and an EX refill, which is super situational but potentially really useful in the appropriate situation. It's very niche, but could be really nifty for when it's good. Her high armor is the attack keystone, no surprise there, and she's got the equal Brave and HP split. Her only known rerun so far is her Lost Chapter, which comes with Lulu. As for the fight, this one is another Agrius fight. The orb here is plus 12 when you recover 2 or more skill uses in one turn, and there are a few characters that you can use to bring in, or you can bring in to fulfill this orb, like Vayne or Y'shtola, Prompto. Agrius is definitely the path of least resistance, though, again, because she not only fulfills the orb, but she makes the boss's most annoying mechanic manageable. The boss is a very large helicopter, no joke, and it will periodically summon an ad. It starts the fight with it, and then I think it's every 20%, so it's like 79, 59, 39, etc. And you need to defeat the ad before the boss gets a turn, because if you don't, the boss is going to get a huge battery into an AoE HP attack that is probably going to be fatal. While the ad is up, the main boss also has 100% evasion for everything, so all of your attacks will miss. Though, I believe, and again, don't quote me on this, I believe guaranteed hit skills will still land, but the easy way out is to kill the ad, and then you stun the boss with Agrius using her Fated Molly, the Brave Plus. You could probably get by with the paralysis from her skill too, but whatever. You then just kind of pile on damage until the boss dies, although again, you do need to be mindful of the orb. The ad is resummoned at HP thresholds, like I mentioned, but the ad itself is otherwise kind of a non-issue as long as you keep killing it quickly. As for my plans, this one is an Omega skip for me. Shulk doesn't really interest me. I didn't play Dirge of Cerberus, so I don't really have any connection or attachment to the character. And someone who spams loads of turns and recovers skills while having to micromanage a 2-turn buff sort of sounds like Vayne, but without a BT. She's absolutely viable for a super, super long time. She does tons of damage. She's, got the shields, she's got the resets. She's really, really good, just she's not interesting to me personally, even though her EX in particular hits very, 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 very hard. And that's it. Those are my thoughts for the upcoming Vayne Burst cycle. Again, let me know in the comments what you think, which plans are. Do you like Shulk? Are you going to Vayne green? Are you going to green... Did I just say, are you going to Vayne green? Are you going to green Vayne? Shut up. Are you going to green Cloud of Darkness? And if so, leave your friend code in the chat, because I'm not doing that shit. Please do keep in mind, though, I am recording this. Today is Sunday, the 17th of October. So the community stream is next Monday, so 8 days from now. So any number of things could change between now and then. I don't even know. So we'll see what happens. Thank you very much for watching once again, and I will see you next time. Take care.